I remember just maybe like 5, 6 years ago. So well before Corona, well before leaving my job, life was fairly normal in my life. And there was a part, being my wife being a teacher during the summer, where life was always chaotic, like most lives are during the school year, because there's daycare, there's shuttling back and forth, there's coordinating, there's exhaustion, your kids are young, you're tired of paying the extra mortgage to the daycare. Like there's just all this extra that goes with everything that I just said. And my wife being a teacher, one thing that I always got spoiled with was her being home with the kids during the summer. We wouldn't have the daycare bill. Life was easier. Laundry was easier. Dinner was easier. Cleaning the house was easier. And everything just felt like... And I could just focus on work. There wasn't this extra thing that was orbiting around me. And it was just easier. I could go in a little bit earlier if I needed to. I could stay a little bit later if I needed to. And then August comes around. In August, and even after Labor Day here up in Wisconsin, is when school starts. It's that time when you have to figure out how to get them back into daycare, readjust the schedules. And I always remember this like summer hangover of, I just want life to be simpler. Life just felt easier. Now, looking back, life was all easier in all categories compared to how life feels now when the kids get older. That's one illusion with parenting or fatherhood, is it just feels hard in the beginning. And you're like, oh, it's got to get easier. No, it really doesn't. It just gets harder and different and more likely closer and closer to real world adult problems, even though your kids are really young still. And I remember just this overwhelming feeling when work came and there was just this hangover of summer. And I just had to suck it back up and get back on the horse and just accept this is my life. Now, in this moment, there was a lot of learning I did, though, because I learned what I didn't like. I learned why I liked it. I remember one year, right before Corona, 2019, this one really was the hard one to go back, because this was the year my wife went to China. And my wife going to China left me with the kids for 10 days. And that was the longest I had been with the kids on my own. And it was that summer that really planted this seed that said, I just want to be dad. None of this other shit matters. I just want those 10 days back. How do I get them back? Was a question going through my head. And so as summer was fading away, it was just a reality of like, bye-bye perfect dad world, back to where you belong. And I remember going into this season for like the next 6 months of just doesn't matter as much here anymore. The drug had wore off almost of what we avoid or we pretend doesn't exist in our lives. And in those moments, it can feel kind of like end of times is coming. It feels like there is this massive closure of the world and we have to go back to being like living in communism where everybody's unhappy and miserable. We all go through the same repetitive thing. No, it's like it's not meant to be end of times, but man, was that a feeling. And so the point of this episode, the point of my rambling, the point of that entire story and reflection and you connecting with a little bit of my story was to remind you end of times is coming. Summer is ending. And no matter what kind of world you're in, whether you're in an entrepreneur world or whether you were in a world just like me, or you were in a world of W-2 and having a job, nothing wrong with that. Whatever it may be, realize the end of times is coming. Transition, school is around the corner. Pause. Acknowledge some of the feelings that you might be having. Acknowledge some of those feelings. Because those feelings can be really, really difficult. And those feelings need to be worked through. I know I can tell you they were telling me things that I didn't really fully listen to back then. And now thinking like, man, those feelings were really trying to scream at me about something. Just realize through all of this, it's changing. With change comes newness. With change comes new opportunities. But I want to acknowledge, and I want you to just put some conscious effort to this cycle of change that we're getting ready to go through in the world. This newness that's coming. This idea that we go through something different and new right now. And we say goodbye to what was, and we get ready to invite what's new. It's an important phase. It's important to acknowledge, and it's important to acknowledge those feelings, because if you don't acknowledge those feelings, and you've been listening to a long podcast for a long time, you know where they end up. They end up in yelling and random places in your heart and your mind that have nothing to do with the change of times, but that's where they're going to come out. It's like that loose pressure that when you build it up, it comes out in every place it can find room. And it's often uncontrolled. So acknowledge. Think about it. Plan. What haven't you done yet? Put some intention behind it. That's your call to action for the weekend. This is your last weekend. Put some intention. What can you do to make it legendary? What can you do to live bigger than who you are? That is all I have for you today. Have an amazing weekend. And I'll be back again with you guys on Monday.